Hoover killers, Broadway killers, framing killers, the Denver Lane Gangster Bloods.
Welcome to Boys in the Hood TV. Today we tapping into the streets of LA, diving into the war between the Denver Lane Gangster Bloods versus the Crips and the Pirus. We're gonna be discussing the South LA Denver Lane Bloods and they set in San Gabriel Valley, the Pasadena Denver Lane Bloods. Since the late 70s, the Denver Lane Bloods have been at war with multiple rival Crip sets. The LA Denver Lane Bloods beef has always been with the Raymond Avenue Crips, a set that's based around 120th Street, and then to the east, 112 Broadway Street Gangster Crips, and then they was beefing with East Coast Block Crips. And if you take it even farther west, they beef with all neighborhood Crips, notably the 111s and the 112 neighborhood Crips, and also the Hoover Crips. And eventually, they would have beef with some Pirus. Now, the Pasadena Denver Lane Bloods had beef with the Altadena Block Crips, the Pasadena Raymond Avenue Crips, and the Do Rock Crips. The Denver Lane Bloods originated in the 70s in the Vermont Vista area around 105th and 120th Streets, while the Pasadena Lanes hit the scene in the 80s, and their hood is around Robinson Park, which stretches from West Mountain View to East Orange Grove Boulevard. When the 80s hit, the Denver Lane Bloods was really active in the streets against a variety different of enemies. In February 1988, a drive-by shooting in West Athens resulted in a tragedy. A known Raymond Avenue Crip, 20-year-old Donald Shepard, was standing outside his home when a white Oldsmobile Cutlass rolled up, and inside that vehicle was Darrell Scrap Moore, a Denver Lane Blood, who opened fire straight from the sunroof. Shepard was hit in his shoulder, but a stray bullet would pierce the front door and struck his grandmother, Alma Lee Washington, in her head as she sat in her wheelchair. The 67-year-old woman was killed instantly. But of course, Raymond Avenue will be looking for some give back. Within the next few hours, a few blocks away, the area would see gunfire near the home of where Denver Lane Blood Moore lived at. But in this situation, nobody was injured. But not long after that shooting, the police would arrest Moore and book him for murder. The police believe Moore had retaliated and shot up Shepard's home due to a shooting that took place the night before with Denver Lane Gangster member Wilson Wood. But around this same time in Pasadena, the Pasadena Denver Lane Bloods was going to war with the Crips also. In the summer of 1988, Marvin McPhee, an Altadena Block Crip, was standing outside on Calaveras Road when two Pasadena Denver members rolled by on a motorcycle and opened fire. He was hit in the chest and eventually died from his wounds. And as the year went on, the tit-for-tat shootings continued to take place. And in that following summer of '89, Paxton Valentine III, a 19-year-old known Denver Lane member, was killed in a drive-by shooting on Cassatas Avenue in Altadena. An Altadena Crip, who was eventually arrested, later told sheriffs during interrogation that Valentine was killed so McPhee could rest easy. Not long after that shooting, in July of '89, the Pasadena Bloods would firebomb a home on West Palm Drive in Altadena, which belonged to Calvin Terratine and Wallace Brown, two known members of Altadena Crips. A total of 9 people would escape, but Sini Irby, who was trapped in her room, suffered more than 90% of burns on her body. And just after a week of suffering these injuries in the hospital, she would die from her injuries. After this situation, Pasadena and Altadena was on fire in the 80s. But back in LA, the Denver Lanes would suffer a major loss. On June 15, 1992, on the 3600 block of West 109th Street in Inglewood, Coco Thrower, Jimmy Cricket Lewis, Shane Wheeler, aka Big Laniac, Mo Smith, all 4 members of the Denver Lane Bloods would lose their life. Big Laniac invited cocaine wholesaler Peter Lopez to his Inglewood home. Lopez was there to buy 2 kilos. But around 2 p.m., several gunshots could be heard coming from the duplex. When police arrived, they found Lopez, Lewis, Big Laniac, Coco, and Smith all shot execution style in different parts of the home. Allegedly, 2 brothers, Victor and Peruvius Hurd of a Campanella Pirus, were responsible for this murder, but they were never charged or arrested. But eventually, they were arrested years later in Shreveport for another murder, but they were eventually released after a witness recanted their statements. Allegedly, the brothers told some people in Shreveport that they were responsible for the Inglewood murders in the duplex.
Some homies, in Inglewood, on 111th in Inglewood, got killed, I don't even know. Some Bloods, it's Bloods killing Bloods, you know what I'm saying? We lost 5 homeboys and homegirls, you know what I'm saying? They came in and shot my homies in the head, and shot the homegirl in the head, and shot her in her stomach, she was pregnant by the homie.
Now, back in Pasadena, the war was still on. In October of 1993, 5 members belonging to a subset of the Pasadena clique, known as the Park 9 Gangster Bloods, or P9 for short, would be on a hunt looking for some get back. Just hours before, at a community arms basketball court, P9 member Fernando Hodges was shot and killed by the Raymond Avenue Crips. P9 believed it was a Raymond Avenue Crip by the name of Crazy D. 2 known Denver Lane members by the name of Bowen and Newborn went to a man named Willie McPhee home armed looking for Crazy D. But when they got there and they questioned Willie about Crazy D, Willie would suggest he didn't know where Willie D stayed at. Not long after, McPhee said he heard shots near Crazy D's home around a block. Then eventually those same shots he heard started to get closer and closer when one bullet struck through McPhee's air conditioning unit. Around 10 p.m. later that night, Bowen of P9, Newborn of P9, and the other few homies drove around in the Gray Ford Temple looking for Raymond Avenue Crips. They would eventually see a group of teenagers leaving a Halloween party and assumed that they were Raymond Avenue Crips. Amongst the teens were Edgar Evans, Stephen Coates, and Reggie Crawford, and a few other friends. As they walked, the boys sang a popular song around that time called Gangster Lane. Unknowing, P9 were waiting in the bushes for the kids to walk past them. And as soon as the boys finished singing the song, they were ambushed. A few of the boys ran and hid, but 3 of the teens were hit with gunfire. Edgar Evans, Stephen Coates, and Reggie Crawford, all 3 killed, and a few of the boys were injured. Ultimately, none of the boys had gang ties, and eventually Carl Holmes, Lorenzo Newborn, Solomon Bowen, Aurelius Bailey, and Herbert McLean Jr., all were indicted on first-degree murder charges, were sentenced to death. Heading back to L.A., the Denver Lane Gangster Bloods would suffer some major hits. The first would be Lil Laniac, also part of the Damu Riders rap group, would be gunned down in front of his daughter in 1995. And this time the shooter wasn't a rival Crips set, actually a Campanella Pirus member. These are the same Pirus that was responsible for Big Laniac death also. In late November 1995 in LA, respected Denver Lane member and Damu member Ramon Peanut McKissick and other Bloods stood outside in the driveway. When Bruce Millsap and Kendrick Lute of 190 East Coast Crips drove by and opened fire on the group. While trying to flee, Peanut was shot and hit 17 times in his back, and eventually he would succumb to his injuries. Millsap and Lute will be ultimately arrested and convicted for Peanut's death, along with 7 other murders around that time period. Now, heading into the 2000s, the wars continued on. One of the first casualties would be OG Denver Lane, Wardell G. Sex Mayberry, who will be gunned down in 2001 on 108th and Fig. Just a few years later, in 2003, another OG Denver Lane member would lose his life. A well-known rapper of the Damu Riders and OG from the set, D. Brazy. It's alleged that Brazy was backdoored and lured to a hotel on 850 and Manchester Avenue in Inglewood, where he would be shot and killed. It's believed that he was backdoored by some cut lanes who did it, and Brazy was pushing uncut at the time. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what cut means, I'm gonna let Big Stretch of Fruit Town explain exactly what being cut and uncut means.
You know cut, you banging your hood, you pressing your line, you from your block. Nothing else is nothing, no exceptions to anything else. When you become cut, that's like you disowning your hood, just like flip-flopping. You can't be from here one day and then now you signing documentations over here saying that I'm from here now. Niggas that you thought was your homies, was your close dogs that's cut, they gonna be the ones that's gonna do you.
On December 7, 2008, Denver Lane members Lancaster, aka Baby Rue, and Brian James, aka E-Mac, were riding in a tan Infiniti I-30. They followed a vehicle coming from Denver Street to a nearby gas station. Inside that vehicle was 9-4 Hoover member Wallace, aka Kool-Aid, along with his mother, who was the driver, his girlfriend, his little sister, and his stepsister. As Wallace and his family drove back from the gas station on 102nd Street and Denver Street, The Denver Lane Bloods flashed their high beam lights, trying to temporarily blind them. Wallace and his family thought it was the police initially. So as they pulled the car over, the Denver Lane Bloods would then put directly on side of them and open fire. 9-4 Hoover member Wallace, aka Kool-Aid, immediately escaped the back seat of the car and dug down. Unfortunately, his mother was shot multiple times and died. His stepsister was shot in the jaw and was temporarily paralyzed, and Wallace's little sister was shot 3 times, but she survived. During the investigation, the police believe it was possible get back for the murder of Denver Lane member Baby Hangout, who was gunned down back in May of 2008. Both James and Lancaster were eventually found guilty of the murder. Going into January 2010, a known Denver Lane member by the name of Deshaun Crip Killer Fairley, just 16 years old, armed himself with a .38 revolver as he waited outside of a liquor store looking for Hoovers. When a group of young men exited the store, among them 18-year-old Eric Hopkins, Deshaun would open fire without warning. Hopkins, who was unarmed, was struck and killed on the spot. Just weeks later, Fairley would ambush a second victim, Charlotte Jenkins, a woman he knew to be affiliated with the Hoovers, shooting her 6 times and grievously wounded her. Eventually, he was arrested, and in 2013, he was convicted of first-degree murder and attempted murder and received 50 years to life. Now, if you watched my last video, I talked about Baby B. Brazy and another Denver Lane member going on basically like a killing spree in 2016. I'm not going to really touch on that, but both Denver Lane members were sentenced to life in prison for multiple shootings, robberies, and killings, mainly targeting the Hoovers. On May of 2025, Pasadena Blood members Jerry Baby Papa Crab Wembley, his brother Jerry Wembley Jr., and Vonnie Richardson drove through Lancaster looking for ops.
3 shootings leave 2 men dead and another one wounded in the Antelope Valley.
Yeah, this all happened within 2 hours and only a few miles apart from each other.
3 separate shooting scenes under investigation by the LA County Sheriff's Department after a man was gunned down here in the parking lot last night. The series of shootings, take a look. They started around 7:20 last night at 30th Street and Avenue J. LA County fire paramedics arriving to find a man. A second shooting was reported around 8:45 last night on Sierra Highway near Avenue H8, where police say a man was rushed to the hospital in critical condition and later died. Investigators there remain on the scene this morning and continue to search for a gunman. And the last shooting, again here at this gas station on the 400 block of East Avenue L around 9:20 last night. A man shot in the parking lot here before collapsing on the street less than 4 miles from that last shooting scene.
That night at 7:15 p.m., Richardson allegedly attempted to murder a victim only identified in court documents as WS, firing at him at least 12 times according to the indictment. The victim, who suffered multiple gunshot wounds, would survive, but he was allegedly a member of the Hoover Crips. After the shooting, prosecutors alleged that Richardson went to Joshua Memorial Park, where he would visit a fallen soldier by the name of TB. And there, Wembley Jr. and Wembley III both took part in the 2-year anniversary of TB's death. Afterward, prosecutors alleged the 3 men then drove to the area of White Carter Park, where victim number 2 was at, only identified as EG. EG was working under the hood of his car, and EG was wearing a Washington National hat. According to the indictment, shortly before 9 p.m., Richardson, Wembley Jr., and Wembley III fired at least 20 gunshots from a 9mm automatic firearm at EG. It's unclear at this moment whether or not the 3 men used the same gun. After the killing, the men allegedly returned back to TB's gravesite once again. According to the indictment, the men then drove from the gas station in Lancaster, where they were captured on surveillance footage, shooting another victim identified only as DM. According to prosecutors, DM was a member of the Broadway Gangster Crips. DM died in the middle of the street from gunshot wounds. Then once again, the men paid a final visit to TB's gravesite. Then around 2:18 a.m., Richardson would allegedly post to his story on Instagram, playing a song with the background with the lyrics that said he tried to run for his life, which prosecution believes is in reference to the alleged murders. As of right now, all 3 men are currently awaiting trial, and if found guilty, they either face the death penalty or will receive life in prison. I want to thank everybody for tapping in and listening to this video, and if you have not yet, go ahead and hit that like and go ahead and subscribe.